Hello and welcome to Faith Matters. This is the show where we take a spiritual perspective on life across the Merseyside region. And our guest in the studio today is John Denny from the Catholic charity VMM International. Welcome, John. Now, John, you had a long and distinguished career perhaps in housing provision management. And a few years ago, you made this transition over to the charitable sector. Tell us about that. You know, what led to that, you making that journey?
Social housing is in a different place now to what it was when I first worked in it. And social housing to me was never really a job. I think it was more of a vocation, really. And so I worked in social housing as chief executive over at Chester and District Housing Trust for some years. And that was quite an interesting journey, and it's worth just looking at that journey for a little while. That will show how I ended up working in the charitable sector. So for me, working in social housing was always about working with people. You can only supply great services to people if you build a great business. You can only build a great business if there was a great vision and a mission. And over a period of time, that was established in Chester and District. When I first went there, it was an organisation that was under supervision by the then Housing Corporation and was actually classed as failing. 18 months later, it became the first organisation to go from 0 to excellent. I mean, these are old ratings now, don't really matter. But more importantly than that, what happened in that first 18 months is that the people in and around Chester that were benefiting from so-labelled social housing provision also started to get involved in the organisation in a way that I think it's fair to say actually transformed their lives as well. So I think of the people that became involved, and I can see them now, people like Felicity, Barbara, Tom, Reggie, people from the community that wanted to make a difference. And so for me, social housing was always about using its might, using its might in order to ensure that people could do more than might reasonably be expected from someone living in so-labelled deprived communities.
So the people you're talking about, these are people who were living in your housing.
Yes, the people
and
that
then
lived
they
in our
became
housing,
involved with the organisation.
Yeah, the resident involvement at Chester and District was pretty special, I've got to say. It was incredibly special. So, as part of our culture in Chester and District, it was about openness and transparency and absolute equality of opportunity between people. So there's never any offices. As a chief exec, I never had an office, and it was always the case for me that if a resident wanted to speak to me, they could come through the front door, walk up the stairs and come to my desk. And over a period of time, that culture got ingrained within the trust, and so it became a sharing of equals, where we all wanted to do the right things for the community. And so lots of initiatives came out of that. Initiatives in education, initiatives on working with people with criminal backgrounds, initiatives on working with drug reoffenders, and also initiatives that involve people in coming into the organisation and doing it for themselves. And there was a very, very special culture there. I think the Christmas parties at Chester and District with the tenants were something quite special. Right. And if anybody is watching this programme that remembers them, I'm sure they do, because they were really open, honest affairs where people actually became part of an organisation rather than receivers of service from an organisation. Now, behind that, there was a great vision to create opportunity, but behind that, there was phenomenal performance as well. So the key indicators for that organisation was probably some of the best in the country. So that meant that we would have surpluses to invest in people. Invest in people, you invest in society, change people's lives, and give people something quite different. Now, for me, and some of the people there at the time won't realise, there was an awful lot of faith in that for me. It was faith in people. Faith in the fact that most people, when they're given an opportunity to take control of their own lives, their own destiny, will actually do so. So for me, it was always a rights and responsibility agenda, but built on a faith that given an opportunity, people can do phenomenal things. And that came back in spades, really, in Chester. That led to the organisation becoming a Times Top 100 company, and performance never went away. We built our own properties, and we had a very healthy development programme. But probably the most positive aspect of that was when we built our own properties using local labour with local people, transferring skills. Now, that transference of skills comes into the job that I'm doing at the moment, but we'll talk about that in a little while.
You've taken the principles and the values that you brought into that organisation and that you developed within that organisation into your wider life, really. So over recent years, you've in this process of transition. You've started a couple of charities, haven't you?
Yeah, and those started back with Chester, I must say. So if you looked at a housing organisation, and despite the conditions they're facing at the moment, which is tough, they've got rent cuts and so on, if you sharpened your pencil, they're very profitable businesses. And a lot of organisations in the private sector would give the right hand to have the sort of revenue streams that those organisations have. And I'm not moving away from the fact that it's difficult for people in the sector at the moment. But it is possible to do things slightly differently. So one of my charities that I set up with Dr. Martin Carey from Hope University is called One Brick at a Time. And that was an idea that came from my wanting to improve performance in the maintenance arm of Chester and District, but not just to improve performance in the conventional sense, but to improve attitude and to actually look at equality and diversity, not in that way that turns people off, trying to say the wrong thing, but in that way that changes something inside. And so with Martin, we came up with the crazy idea of nipping over to Uganda, staying with the Mill Hill brothers, finding ourselves in Fort Portal, and then coming up and that Fort Portal, by the way, is just on the border with the Congo, just above Rwanda, and coming up with the idea that there's lots of young apprentices in that part of Uganda that would benefit from spending time with some skilled tradeswomen and tradesmen from the UK. And after a short period of time, Martin and myself brought this idea together, and we found that we could send maintenance men and women from Chester and District over to Uganda. They would be paired up with local apprentices, and we came up with the concept of building a reliable organisation in Fort Portal that people trusted to build, repair and maintain schools. And so the tradesmen and women would go out, they'd get young apprentices working with them, and it transformed both sides. And to a person, the people that came back had a different view on life. And then that fed into the culture of CDHT and improved performance beyond belief. But for me, it comes back to that. It's always about people. It's always about having faith in people and give people an opportunity, and they very, very rarely let you down. Certainly with the groups that I was mixing with there. So the people in Chester benefited. And I remember we brought a fantastic African priest back to Chester with us. It's different to bring in a giraffe, isn't it? But the African priest, Father Sebastian, and he became known as the brick priest. And he inspired people because of what he did. He made his own bricks and built his own church and built his own accommodation. So on the back of that sort of inspiration, actually, working in social housing on I say it again, a so-labelled deprived estate is actually quite easy. And you bring those two things together and people's lives change. So OBAT now has been running for 6, 7, 8 years. 6,000 children have gone through the education system, and it's now become something that's quite different in the development sector, in that it's a trusted organisation that has been there no matter what.
Right. Okay.
And so it's made its mark over in Fort Portal.
So tell us about your other charity, which is the Hope and Community Trust. Now, you've placed young people from deprived estates, say in Liverpool, in public schools, including Eton. Yeah. Have I got that right?
You've got that absolutely right.
Tell us about that, how that came about and how that works.
How it came about and how it works. So it was controversial. I don't think it's controversial anymore. But again, as a chief executive in the social housing sector, I thought it was my responsibility, as well as ensuring that the business ran well. I fortunately had a very talented team of directors that did that. But it was also to make connections with the community in a way that they felt totally engaged with the organisation. And in doing that, it became very clear to me that there were young men and young women on those estates that were capable of achieving just as much, if not more, than people from, and it's not their fault, a privileged background. And I remember when this current government got into its first term, I remember that point really clearly, and it was in the Daily Mail, the Daily Mirror. This cabinet, everybody went to Eton. And I just thought, well, what is so damn special about Eton? So coming from the left... And
you didn't go to Eton?
No, clearly not. I wish I had, in hindsight. But there's no chance from where I come from, I tell you. But thinking that through, what struck me more than anything, Eton is not going to go anywhere. Eton is there, it's part of the establishment, 700 years on, and it'll go for another 700 years. But people from the estates where we were working would never get a cat in house chance of going there. So I looked at what was so damn special about Eton. and you look into the statistics about how many kids from public sector go to, say, Oxford and Cambridge, how many kids from the public sector, say, work as barristers and so on. And you look at all those key statistics and you find, well, actually, the kids that I love to work with so much didn't stand much of a chance. Now, again, working with Dr. Martin Carey, we wrote to the head of Eton, Tony Little. He's retired this year. Wonderful man. And so he read the letter and invited us down. So I went and we spent some time with Tony. And I've got to say that he carefully plucked out all my prejudices and showed a side to Eton that I didn't really exist. Now, I'm no apologist for Eton in any way, shape or form, but I am a supporter of giving people opportunities from difficult backgrounds that they might never have had. So over a period of time, Tony, Martin and myself worked on this, and Martin in particular, along with Colette Brown from Hope University, came together with an idea that could possibly send a young man to Eton. The first young man that went to Eton, I can't give his name obviously, was from Croxteth, and he's had a fantastic time there. And he's now moved on and he's off to Edinburgh. So he's going to be studying at Edinburgh.
Edinburgh University.
Edinburgh University. Now, since then...
I'm going to have to stop now because we're going to our commercial break, but we'll come back and talk very briefly about that.
Yeah, we need to finish it.
Before talking about VMM and what you're doing across the world now in VMM. So join us after the break for Faith Matters, where we're talking with John Denny about charitable work here in Merseyside and across the world. Hello and welcome back to Faith Matters. We have John Denny from VMM International in the studio with us today. We've been talking about his transition from the public sector to the third sector and his charitable work. Now, before the break, John, you were talking about the Hope and Community Trust, where you're placing young people from deprived backgrounds here on Merseyside into the best public schools. And you were saying you got one lad into Eton, and you were about to say what has come since then. Just briefly wrap that up.
So just to wrap that up very, very, very quickly, we formed a partnership with a London-based organisation, the Springboard Trust, and we've now, 2-3 years since we set the project up, I think there's around 29, 30 young people, young men, young women. I've got into some of the finest establishments in the UK.
From more deprived kind of backgrounds, or backgrounds where they lack opportunity.
Yeah, because all this was ever about was creating the opportunity for people to use their skills, undoubted skills that exist in some of our so-labelled estates, and do something really special and actually progress. And I think the best way to assess that result is to look at some of the young women and young men that have gone through that now, and what had the impact that has had on their lives. And the only condition on this is that when they get the opportunity to be kind, that they do so. Yeah. And I think the return on the estates where they came from is not what people would exist. This really does smash some prejudices that we've all held. And so these kids go back, they work on their estates, they've got ambition, they will do wonderful things in their lives.
Okay, so like paying it forward, to use that film, pay it forward.
Very much so, yeah.
Okay, let's come to VMM International. What does that stand for? And it's a Catholic charity. Just tell us about it, the vision and so on.
Right, so VMM International. So VMM stands for the Volunteer Missionary Movement. It's a wonderful organisation. It's 47 years old now, and it was founded by a lady called Edwina Gately. Now, some people watching this programme will know all about Edwina. So Edwina is very much a visionary, and she had this absolute belief that the laity could do great work in terms of missionary work.
The non-ordained people within the life of the church, yeah.
And she worked incredibly hard to get buy-in from the Catholic Church on that. And so she managed it. She pulled it off. She had the vision. She managed to get that done. She spent many years working in Africa in the education system. She came back with that experience, and then she set up Community in London. And they found projects in Africa, they assessed need, and they matched people from the UK with different positions in Africa, and they would be prepared, trained, sent out, and they would work there. But the difference is, so if you compare VMM as a volunteer a development organisation, because it's a development organisation now, then it's progressed considerably. So it's not just about just going out there and doing a piece of work. This is about, from VMM's perspective, having the opportunity to share your life. So if you compared VMM to a huge international development organisation, then we might have the same objectives in terms of the sustainable millennium goals. We may well have that, and we certainly aspire to meet them. But the difference here is that people share their life in a different way. So we've recently looked at our vision and mission, and in many ways we've gone back to the roots that Edwina first established in saying that, yeah, we are a mission-based organisation, but we're also a damn good development organisation as well, and we follow the best of all development practices that's on the table at the moment. We try to encapsulate that in our new vision statement, and that is now we've described ourselves as an organisation that wants to create a world, and it's an Irish saying this, so some of your Irish viewers will know this, to create a world where we live in the shelter of one another. And I think, you know, in a world that is growing smaller and smaller in terms of its connectivity, then that describes what we want to do. Because something in Africa has usually been caused by something from the West, and there is that connection there, so the justice issue as well. Our mission statement is to simply share what we are, and share who we are, and not just what we have. And that is our difference. So a volunteer missionary for VMM, they'll get some fantastic training, but they've got to respond to the call that we have. Yeah. And they will go and live and share their skills and ultimately transfer their skills, and their skills will be transferred out. And so there's an ongoing impact. And some of the work that the volunteer missionaries do, because they share their lives so intently and so intensely, it goes way beyond any of the projects that we establish. And this is about their faith.
So how long are these people going out for? And what countries?
Yeah, so the people can go out for a 12-month stint. Some people go out for 2 years, some people go out for 3 years. Some people have spent 15 years. I mean, I think of Tony Woods, who's an Irish chap that has spent, must be 15, 20 years, I'm sure I'll be corrected on this when I get back, as the Chancellor over in Lodwar, as part of the diocese there. And so these people are from the laity, but they're effectively, in many respects, missionaries. But then you've got, at the other end of the spectrum, you've got people that can go for 12 months that have a real specialist skill, a doctor, a nurse, a surgeon, an architect, a builder, an agriculturalist. So we go right across the spectrum. Now, the countries that we work in, so we work in 9 African countries at the moment, and that ranges from Tanzania, Uganda, Zambia, Malawi, Chad, South Sudan. So, so we're not afraid to go where other people might not go. And there's a few more, and of course, Uganda.
So some areas of danger, really, in some ways.
I think when people choose to go and work in South Sudan and Chad, then they know it's not going to be easy. They know that there's going to be isolation there, but they know that the impact of the work that they can have is absolutely phenomenal, genuinely phenomenal. And sort of if you looked at some of the projects that we deal with, so that will range from teaching through to health education, and at the moment we've returned to Sierra Leone, so we're one of the first to go back to Sierra Leone.
So the people are going, some of these are people who are taking like a year out of their working life to go and do this, or 2 years. So yeah, and might be a doctor or something who takes a year out. This
varies, yeah. So some people will take a year or 2 out, and I've noticed that some people genuinely commit their lives to it. Now, the people that commit their lives to it, I think, are getting rarer, but those that want to commit a certain part of their life to it, the opportunity is still there. And that's the niche, that's the specific development niche that I believe that we fill very, very well indeed. And we have a number of vacancies available at the moment, and people will go out. So ultimately, by the end of this year, we're hoping to have between 50 and 60 volunteer missionaries out there in the field. And we will keep that going. But yeah, people want to give 1, 2, 3, sometimes 4 or 5 years of their lives, and they give an awful lot more than just their skill. The ultimate aim, of course, is skills are transferred, and that satisfies the donor. So in Ireland, we benefit from a very generous donor in an organisation called Mission Cara. Mission Cara are funded by Irish Aid. They're a very careful donor. They want to make sure that public money is spent well. And so their purpose in life is to work with all the various congregations of which we are counted as a member, and we partner with the congregations, make best use of our faith-based network, and make sure that we land in the right places, because ultimately need is infinite in some of the countries that we're working with. And, you know, and I know there's a public perception out there at the moment that should we be doing this sort of work? Well, actually, not only is the work invaluable, the impact that it has on the people is invaluable, and the wider impact it has on the people when they can come back and work on a home-based programme is absolutely invaluable as well.
Okay, I want to.
Sorry.
No, don't apologise. It's just fantastic. And now you don't come from a faith background per se. Am I right in saying that?
Absolutely.
And you now kind of live between here and Dublin. So the headquarters is currently in Dublin. You've got an office base in Hope University, and your family live in Warrington. That's right. Okay, so you're commuting. Now, when you're out in Dublin, you stay with the Christian Brothers out there.
That's true.
But I mean, we're friends, so we've talked about these things off air. You've made a bit of a journey, a faith journey in a way, through your involvement with VMM, and even maybe you could you've made. It's not just, we're talking about your journey here, so it's not just your journey from the public sector to the charitable sector. There's a faith element here. You know, what would you say about that?
There's a huge faith element there, and I think it would be fair to say that in all the work that I've done, faith has always been there in some way, shape or form. And as I've got slightly older and reflect on things in a slightly different way, I realised that you have to be open to the fact that faith is there. It's always there. And if you listen to it, then you can get the right answers and the right guidance. Now, you're right, Keith. 10 years ago, I would never have said that. I might have thought it, but I would never have admitted it.
Well, I can remember the first time we met, and I think, in a clerical collar. We had met, and you were I remember you being slightly uncomfortable. It was at a meeting that we had together, and so this was before this kind of period of time. So you've made that journey.
See, and it has been a journey, but it's a wonderful journey. And I've got to say, you know, I know all about the Christian Brothers. I know the best and the worst of that story. But the Christian community that I stay in when I live in Dublin is wonderful. And I've got to say, spending time with the 5 chaps that live there, Bart, Nevard, Paddy A, Paddy B, Paddy A and Paddy B and Jim, is a wonderful experience. I mean, between them, some of them spent 40 years in Zambia. And to listen to some of their stories and their reflections on life is a privilege I don't think many people get. Equally, I spend time with a number of the congregations, only small amounts of time. And so Sister Anne from the Missionary Sisters of St Columba. So that's a new organisation that we're working with. And Julie McAvoy, who's our International Development Manager, and does far more than that. If Julie has rescued the company in many respects. She started off a relationship now that will take us into Myanmar. And so, people... Yeah.
So it's shaping you. Right, we're coming to the end now, really. Sadly. But short-term mission, you're developing into that now. The organisation is heading in that direction for short-term mission.
So we've got our long-term mission. Now we're going to move to some short-term mission as well. That will give young men, young women, and people of any age group who have got the aspiration and the will and the want to experience mission can do so in short doses.
Thank you, John. It's been great having you, and we look forward to having you again, perhaps on the programme. Thank you for watching. See you next time for Faith Matters.
Thank you.